Welcome to Module 1, Understanding Addiction. Substance abuse is a widespread problem faced by millions of Americans each year. For example, the 2018 National Survey on Drug Use and Health discovered that approximately 164 million, or 60% of people over the age 12, used substances, such as tobacco, alcohol, and illegal drugs in the United States. The report included over 139 million people drinking alcohol, 58 million people using a tobacco product, and 31 million people consuming an illegal drug. Of these individuals, 20 million people over the age of 12 also reported having a substance use disorder over the past year. This included more than 14 million people reporting alcoholism, 8 million reporting an illegal drug use problem, and the most common substance reported was marijuana, with over 4 million people. That same year, some 2 million people stated they had an opioid use disorder, which included 1.7 million people addicted to a prescription pain reliever and over 500,000 people abusing heroin. Despite the staggering number of people that substance abuse affects, many users feel isolated and alone in their battle against addiction. Even more alarming is the idea that many people in the United States know little about addiction, relying on common knowledge that often turns out to be untrue or stigmatizing. It's no wonder that many individuals struggling with addiction do not seek help when needed. Because so many people in the U.S. have been affected by addiction and many suffer silently, this self-paced course has several goals. First, to provide you with basic information about substance abuse and addiction to increase understanding, enlighten you with knowledge, and reduce stigma. To illustrate the complexity of addiction in a way that makes sense, breaking down different aspects of substance abuse and behaviors in a fashion that anyone can understand. To empower you by providing you new ways to envision your own life and the relationships you have with substances or behaviors that could be potentially damaging, and to provide you with new ways to engage in personal reflection, growth, and self-motivated change. Have you ever thought about the word drug and what it means to you? The definition often depends on who you ask. For example, many individuals believe there is a difference between medicines and drugs, though medications can be drugs if abused. Others consider a drug anything that is bought and used illegally, relying on our laws and policies to draw the line. Let's begin our study by defining the word drug as it will be used in this course. DrugAware released its most recent definition of the word drug in 2020. According to this definition, a drug is anything, except for food and water, that when taken into the body changes the way it functions physically and/or psychologically. Drugs can be legal, such as alcohol and prescription medications prescribed to you, or illegal, such as cocaine or heroin. The focus of this class is psychoactive drugs, which affects the central nervous system and changes a person's mood, thinking, and behavior. Psychoactive drugs are divided into 4 main categories: depressants, stimulants, hallucinogens, and other. Now let's move on to the basics of addiction itself. The definition of addiction also depends on your source. For example, the National Institute on Drug Abuse defines addiction as a chronic relapsing disorder characterized by compulsive drug seeking, continued use despite harmful consequences, and long-lasting changes to the brain. It's considered both a complex brain disorder and a mental illness. The Substance Abuse and Mental Health Services Administration, or SAMHSA, adds that substance use disorders happen when chronic use of alcohol or other drugs causes significant problems, which can include such issues as health problems, disability, and failure to meet your major responsibilities in life. And finally, the National Institute of Health concludes that substance use disorder changes normal desires and priorities. It changes normal behaviors and interferes with the ability to work, go to school, and have good relationships with friends and family. There is no single factor that determines whether a person will become addicted to drugs. Research has determined that the likelihood an adult will develop a substance use disorder depends on risk and protective factors that are present currently and throughout their lives. A risk factor increases the chance that taking drugs will lead to drug abuse and addiction. while protective factors reduce a person's risk. Risk and protective factors can be environmental, such as something in your life, or biological and psychological. Social aspects of a person's life can act as protective and risk factors as well. The presence of risk factors, however, is not a guarantee that you will become addicted. An individual whose life and experiences include many risk factors that increase their likelihood of addiction may remain addiction free because of the protective factors that are also present in their lives. So let's move on to discuss the biological and psychological aspects. Biological factors that increase the risk of abusing substances can include genetic predisposition, gender, and pre-existing medical conditions. For example, the use of a potentially addicting medication, such as opioids, to treat chronic or long-term illness or injury could lead to a buildup of tolerance and eventual dependence. This also includes treatment for mental disorders, such as depression, where the individual is prescribed a potentially addicting substance for treatment. The existence of a mental illness may also cause the individual to abuse substances as a form of self-medication. Environmental risk factors include family factors. This is the environment in your home, especially during childhood, that can produce both risk and protective factors. For example, if your parents or older family members used drugs or alcohol or engaged in criminal activity, it increased your risk of a future drug problem. Youth who struggle with schoolwork or grades or have poor social skills are at further risk for using or becoming addicted to drugs. Adults that struggle with added pressures at work, a poor work environment, or dislike their field are also at risk. Peers and other friends can heavily influence drug or alcohol use, especially during teen years. Teens who use drugs can sway even those that do not have risk factors to try drugs for the first time. Even adults can be influenced by their peers as well. Age of first use. Research states that the earlier you begin to use drugs, the more likely you are to develop an addiction. Research also suggests this might be due to harmful effects substances can have on the brain while it is still developing. Other studies conclude that early use may stem from a combination of early social and biological risk factors mentioned above, such as an unstable home life, genes, or mental illness. And finally, route of use. The way a substance is taken can increase the risk of a substance use disorder. For example, smoking or injecting a drug into your vein increases its addictive potential. This is because both smoked and injected drugs enter the brain within seconds, which creates a powerful rush of euphoria, though the intense high can fade in minutes. Researchers believe that this powerful contrast is what drives some users to repeatedly consume drugs, chasing that first high. Let's examine a sample of a student who has listed out her risk and protective factors. You'll notice that she has such risk factors as lack of parental supervision, drug use in her school, lack of positive peer support, lack of motivating activities, and little interest in her education. However, protective factors were also present, including positive adult influences aside from her parents, a school drug prevention program, student and peer support groups for drug prevention, participation in some extracurricular activities, and good grades. Another key factor in the likelihood an individual will develop a substance use disorder is the presence of childhood trauma. The ACEs, or Adverse Childhood Experiences Survey, was developed from information collected during the ACE study. Individuals were asked to complete a survey about their childhood experiences, current health status, and behaviors during routine checkups. Almost 2/3 of participants reported having at least one ACE. The study determined a significant relationship between adverse childhood experiences and negative health and well-being outcomes. ACEs include potentially traumatic events that occur between the ages of 0 and 17, such as violence, abuse, and neglect, witnessing violence in the home or community, and having a family member attempt or die by suicide. The ACE survey has been used by many organizations for prevention and treatment of different health concerns. The ACE survey is widely used to examine relationships among adult addiction and adverse childhood experiences. Research findings conclude that all ACEs are associated with increased likelihood of adolescent or adult substance abuse. For more information on the ACE study or the ACEs survey and how it relates to substance abuse, please see the additional resources section of this class. While the presence of childhood trauma increases the likelihood of substance abuse, protective factors also play a role in whether the individual will become addicted to substances. For additional information on the ACE study or the ways childhood trauma can affect your personal health, you may also follow the link that is located in the back of your workbook. Now it's time to reflect on addiction in our own lives. Please pause the video and complete the exercise on page 13, Reflecting on Addiction. Once you have completed this, you may return to the video for the remainder of Module 1. Theories about addiction attempt to explain what causes individuals to continue to use drugs despite negative consequences. Each theory has developed its own reasons for addiction and solutions to the problem of substance abuse. Moral models. Individuals who use moral models believe that addictions develop because of human weaknesses or defects in their personality and does not accept any biological basis for addiction. These theories are less understanding of an individual who is struggling with addiction and believes that improving a person's moral strength will provide them with the will to stop abusing drugs. While not commonly used by substance abuse experts, some professionals still believe that substance abuse is a matter of choice and result of poor decision making. Disease models. Also known as medical models, these theories state that addiction is an illness and is a result of the impairment of healthy neurochemical or brain or behavioral processes. This model focuses on the disease of addiction, which means that addiction is viewed as a primary illness and is not the result of any other reasons. Similar to disease models are genetic models. These models are based off the idea that some individuals have genetic predisposition to addiction. You often hear this stated as, "it runs in my family," by those who follow these theories. While research has shown that genetic predisposition plays a role in dependency, experts struggle to separate the parts of addiction that are due to genetics from other social causes of substance abuse, such as in the environment in your childhood home. Less known cultural models recognize that there is a strong influence from the person's culture in the development of addiction. These theories examine which cultures are more susceptible to addiction and what roles culture may play in both protective and risk factors. And finally, blended models. These models consider all elements of other models in the development of dependency. They believe that substance abuse is a unique experience for each individual, and that each person's specific situations must be considered on a case-by-case basis. This model is often used by counselors and addiction specialists because it recognizes that addiction is more complex than a simple explanation can provide. The reasons an individual develops a substance use disorder and what addiction may look like are different for everyone. However, the American Psychiatric Association, or APA, has determined through extensive research that each substance use disorder has specific behaviors an individual will display that may indicate a person has developed an addiction to drugs. For example, an individual is likely to have a substance use disorder if they display at least two of the following symptoms. The substance is taken in larger amounts or over a longer period of time than was intended. There is a persistent desire or unsuccessful attempts to cut down or control use. A great deal of time is spent in activities necessary to obtain, use, or recover from the effects. They may also have a craving or a strong desire to use. You'll see recurrent use despite persistent social or interpersonal problems that are caused by or made worse by use. They may have failure to fulfill major roles at work, school, or home. There are important social, occupational, or recreational activities given up or reduced because of use. You'll see recurrent use in situations that are hazardous, such as drinking and driving. And there's continued use despite physical and psychological problems likely to have been caused by or made worse by use. Two additional factors that are present in substance use disorders are tolerance and withdrawal. Tolerance means using increased amounts of the substance to get the same effect, while withdrawal includes physical and/or psychological symptoms the person experiences when they do not consume the substance. While reading this section, you may have determined that you or someone you love has at least two or more of the symptoms listed above. It is not recommended that you self-diagnose. If you feel you have symptoms that suggest a substance use disorder, please contact your referral source, family physician, or local substance use treatment facility. For many decades, society has believed that addictions were isolated to drugs that you consume, with an emphasis on chemical dependencies. However, in the 1980s, the APA recognized problem gambling and the newest version of the DSM, or Diagnostic Statistical Manual of Mental Disorders. While gambling is currently the only recognized behavioral addiction in the DSM-5, research is growing on the idea that other behaviors may have the potential to form addiction. Researchers state that behavioral addictions share many similar traits to substance use disorders, including their history or the way they form, the person's firsthand experiences, relationships with other mental or physical health issues, genetic contributions, changes to the brain, and results from treatment. In addition to shared traits, behavioral addictions each have their own unique characteristics. For example, gambling disorder has unique features such as chasing or returning to gamble after losses, and bailouts or depending on other people for assistance with financial losses from gambling. The idea that you could become addicted to things you do not consume brings forth another truth for this class: that addiction is not determined by chemical dependence, but it's determined by behaviors. Research is considering such behaviors as compulsive shopping, internet, social media, and video games, among many others, as having the potential to form addictions. For example, individuals with a video game addiction may display some similar traits to substance addictions and unique behaviors considered problematic. Those addicted to video games may make in-game goals higher priority than real-life ones, focusing completely on accomplishments and activities during gameplay and failing to take actions for success outside the game. This could be compared to an individual with alcoholism who has reduced or given up certain work, school, or recreational activities for use. Video game players with an addiction may also give up real-life friendships and replace them with in-game social lives. In comparison, an individual with alcoholism may replace friends with drinking buddies. Individuals may experience distress due to these and other behaviors that have not yet been classified as addictions, and may find that little help is availably present. The good news is that many of the coping skills found in this class and other resources can assist in changing behaviors that are potentially damaging or addicting, and that may be causing consequences for the individual. For more information on problem gambling and other resources available, please see the appendix of this book. To summarize today's key points, addiction affects millions of Americans each year. Over 164 million people over the age of 12 were using substances, and more than 20 million reported a substance use disorder in 2018 alone. This does not include individuals who did not report having a substance use disorder, but do in fact have an addiction. The definitions of drug and addiction depend on your source of information, and there are many theories that attempt to explain why addiction forms and how to treat it. We learned that no single factor determines if an individual will become addicted. There are environmental, biological, psychological, and social aspects of life that affect outcomes. Risk and protective factors. Risk factors increase the likelihood a person would develop an addiction, and protective factors reduce a person's likelihood. We also discussed common symptoms of substance use disorders. And finally, we introduced behavioral addictions. Addiction is not defined by substances. It is defined by behaviors. Now that you have completed Module 1, you may move on to the quiz. Remember, in order to pass the quiz, you must receive a score of 90% or higher. Please review the materials and your workbook prior to taking the class to assist in receiving a passing grade. There is no time limit on the quiz, and you may attempt the quiz multiple times. Thank you, and I will see you in Module 2.